a deeply divided moment in American history.
When you see something that is not right, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something.
Democrats would rather trip the president just to see him stumble than see America succeed.
The president's ultimate fight is just beginning.
Article 1 is adopted.
It is 11 o'clock in Washington, D.C. The headline, expected but still of enormous magnitude. President Donald J. Trump has been impeached. Good evening, I'm David Allen. Nicole has the evening off. And thanks for trusting us to get you up to speed on what has been a contentious debate all day in the U.S. House of Representatives. Here's how we are covering this big story tonight. We're taking you step by step through what's next. It is a lengthy process still. The Verified team will join us with why the process in the Senate will be unlike anything that we have ever seen before. But first, we begin with Serena Marshall, who is live for us tonight on Capitol Hill. Serena, what is the very latest from there?
Good evening. It was 8:21 Eastern Time when Democrats crossed the threshold to impeach the president on abuse of power. In the end, 2 Democrats voting with their Republican colleagues on that charge, while on obstruction, 3 Democrats defecting.
Article 1 is adopted.
President Donald J. Trump has officially been impeached while in office. Just the 3rd in American history. The president impeached on 2 articles for abusing the power of his office for personal gain when he pressured the leader of Ukraine to investigate his political opponents, and obstructing Congress after he blocked documents and witnesses with direct knowledge of what occurred with Ukraine from being provided to the House committees.
And so I view this vote, as something that we did to honor the vision of our founders.
The vote followed the 6 hours of debate on the House floor, which had nearly every member of Congress speaking out for.
When you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something.
And against the impeachment.
Democrats would rather trip the president just to see him stumble than see America succeed.
Well, both sides held their party lines. One member, Justin Amash, a Republican turned independent, voting with the Democrats.
His actions reflect precisely the type of conduct the framers of the Constitution intended to remedy through the power of impeachment.
Well, another, the only presidential candidate that could cast a vote, Tulsi Gabbard, voting present. Moments before the vote was set to begin, the president taking to the stage in Michigan, setting up an astounding split screen with a remarkably different tone.
It doesn't really feel like we're being impeached. They have nothing. They're the ones that should be impeached, every one of them.
While the president has been impeached, the decision on removal is ultimately up to the Senate. It's unclear yet what that Senate trial will look like, however, and if there will be live witnesses. That's something President Trump has said he wants, but top Republicans have pushed back against. In the end, it'll end up being a decision between the minority and majority leader, expected to meet sometime tomorrow. Live on Capitol Hill, Serena Marshall, ABC News. Now back to you.
All right, so let's lay out what happens next. The impeachment process moves to the Republican-controlled Senate. There aren't any set rules for the Senate trial at this point, so a resolution will need to be passed to lay out the trial procedures. Then they will presumably hold a trial. A team of lawmakers from the House called managers play the role of prosecutors. The president has defense lawyers, and the Senate is the jury. After the trial, the Senate votes. If fewer than 2/3 of the senators find the president not guilty, President Trump remains in office. If 2/3 or more of them find him guilty, President Trump is removed from office and Vice President Mike Pence takes over as president. There is no appeal. But a lot of that is easier said than done. That is, if history from past impeachments have taught us anything. We had the Verified team look into the process and how it will look very different from what we have seen so far. Here's Jason Puckett.
Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. The House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. Quote, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. Simple, right? The House impeaches the president, the Senate holds the trial. Well, No, not that simple. We've had weeks of testimony in House committees. We heard from advisors, former ambassadors, and more. But when it comes to the Senate, the trial itself could look completely different. Take another look. The Constitution says the Senate will hold the trial, that the senators will be on oath, and that it will take 2/3 vote to convict. But it leaves everything else up to the Senate. So big questions like, will there be witnesses, have to be debated. In President Andrew Johnson's impeachment, 40 witnesses testified in public. In President Clinton's impeachment, after long debate, witnesses were questioned in private and videotape clips were played to the Senate. So you can see it's different each and every time. Historically, the Senate majority and minority leaders have worked together to develop the rules. Now that's Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer in this case. They both said they want to come up with bipartisan rules like in the past, but it's worth noting the Republicans have enough Senate members to vote through rules without any Democratic support. One last note, the Constitution also says that the Supreme Court Chief Justice will oversee the trial. Now, Chief Roberts in this case could allow witnesses or rule changes that aren't explicitly written out, but unlike a judge in a courtroom, Justice Roberts can actually be overruled. If a majority votes against his ruling, it's overturned. Bottom line, the Senate holds the power here, and they will determine not only the rules for the trial, but how those rules are actually carried out. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett.
Tonight will go down in history, and you know it is far from over. Our local reps are sounding off. Open up the 13 News Now app to see what they're saying. All right, let's bring it back home. This turf war between Portsmouth and the city's sheriff is starting to feel like a schoolyard fight. They're still arguing over the future of the city jail, which the sheriff runs. The city asked the judge to force the sheriff to send inmates at the city lockup to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. Sheriff Moore says that jail isn't safe. Nico Clemens picks up the story.
Tonight, the city of Portsmouth firing back at Portsmouth Sheriff Michael Moore with a lawsuit of its own. Assistant City Attorney Burl Stromberg says according to a more than 20-year agreement with the city, the sheriff is obligated to send prisoners to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail.
We think it's wrong. We think it puts Portsmouth in breach of contract.
Stromberg says the Portsmouth prison population at the Hampton Roads Regional Jail has dropped to about 35 prisoners, yet the city pays for 250 beds.
If the city jail were to be closed down, Portsmouth would save $2 million a year right off the bat.
In July, inspectors condemned the Portsmouth Civic Center complex, including the jail and sheriff's office. Then the sheriff filed an injunction to keep the jail open and then sued the city over the abrupt condemnation. After a hearing in September, a judge approved the condemnation for all the buildings, but never made a decision on the jail.
It has been difficult. Any conflict is difficult.
Sheriff Moore previously said he refuses to send inmates to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail due to medical problems and civil rights violations, detailed in a U.S. Department of Justice report released in December 2018.
I am responsible for maintaining their health and well-being.
The problems that were pointed out in a DOJ report have been addressed.
Sheriff Moore's attorney argued in court that the jail is in good condition and just needs a few repairs. I reached out to Sheriff Moore's attorney but have not heard back. Stromberg calls the jail a dangerous building.
We wanted a resolution of it all, and we sort of expect that.
All right, Nico, so what's next here?
David, lots going on. Both parties head back to court in January for a hearing.
Okay.
The judge may decide on the jail then. I also spoke with the undersheriff, Portsmouth undersheriff today. He says all he had to say really was they're still reviewing this new lawsuit. And then finally, also on the table is Sheriff Moore's lawsuit, which asks the court to either build or force the city to build a new jail or replace or repair the existing one. So lots going on, much more on our website, 13newsnow.com.
Wow. All right. Thanks, Nico. Well, let's take you live outside to downtown Norfolk. It's hard to think we were pushing 70 degrees earlier this week. Here's how it feels out there right now. What a difference, huh? And the temperature is only going to continue to drop. Meteorologist Evan Stewart is here with what you can expect when you walk out the door tomorrow morning.
A cold morning. We had a reinforcing shot of cold air work its way in, and that means that we're going to look at wind chills in the teens as you wake up tomorrow morning. It is going to be a big change from the 70-degree readings that we saw yesterday. Clear skies. We had one cold front move through yesterday evening, another one that moved through this evening, and that's what's brought in all of this cold air blowing in from the northwest, and we're going to see more of it as we go into the day on Thursday. Current air temperatures pretty much in the 30s everywhere. 32 degrees in Saluda, 29 in West Point. That's one of the colder spots. 38 in Norfolk, 37 in Elizabeth City, 40 in Edenton. but when you factor in those winds, it feels already like the mid-20s back towards Franklin and Emporia. Low 30s right near the coastline, although 23 degrees is the current wind chill in Hampton, 28 in Virginia Beach, and 34 even along the Outer Banks. It feels like close to the freezing mark. So how are things going to look as you wake up tomorrow morning? Here's Futurecast at 5 a.m. Notice wind chill 14, 16, 18 degrees, even near the coastline. We're looking at wind chills in the teens, and it's not until we get to about 9 a.m. that it finally starts to feel like 20 degrees, despite a lot of sunshine. And through the afternoon, it's still going to feel like below freezing in many spots, even though air temperatures will be up into the mid-30s. So a cold afternoon tomorrow. But if you want some warmer weather, I do have that in the extended forecast. Beyond tomorrow, every single day gets a little bit warmer all the way to Christmas Day. I'll have that 7-day forecast coming up in a few minutes.
All right, things are busy, but we didn't forget about your 3 big stories. Let's start in Norfolk. Police are looking for this guy. He's Hank Smith, and he's got a warrant out for homicide. He was arrested months ago on a child abuse charge in connection with 4-year-old Larkin Carr's death. Also in Norfolk, a man is hurt after a shooting in Park Place. Officers were called to 34th Street around 3:30 this afternoon. Not a lot of details here so far. We're still waiting to hear from police on how the victim is doing and if they're still looking for a suspect. This one's pretty disturbing. A Virginia Beach man admits to spying on women with a camera hidden in the bathroom of his Airbnb. A guest found it while showering back in July. She pulled it out of the ceiling and reported it to police. We're not naming the man because he hasn't been charged, but police say they're still investigating. But a day of heavy headlines, right? But I want to show you something good before we take a little bit of a break. Christmas came early for 62 local military families. A nonprofit picked up the tab for their layaway at the Norfolk Next. Here's what happened when Dan Kennedy gave them the news, live this morning on GMA.
Well, let me tell you, I've got the name right here in my pocket. And you see what that says? It's everyone!